Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. I have with me one of my favorite people to talk to as far as the economy is concerned, Professor Dipankar Sengupta from the University of Jammu. We've had some very interesting interactions in the past, and I hope this one is going to be great as well. Sir, namaskar, sir. Good to
Thank
have
you.
you back.
Namaskar to you. Yeah, good to have you back.
Sir, I
Good to
wanted
be
to
back.
basically talk to you about India's economic future because there's a lot which is happening in the country today. We are at what would someone say is that we are at the cusp of, breaking out sort of a thing. And that cusp is not like, 3 days, 5 days, going to be 3, 5 years. That cusp will be there. And then probably post 3, 5 years, we could probably say that we have broken out into a good economic future. Would you agree with this kind of a paraphrasing that a lot of people are today doing, sir?
I would put it stronger. You see, we are at a crucial turning point. The outcome of this election will actually determine a lot of things. And if you think I am overstating, see what happened in 2004.
Hmm.
You see, a lot of people say, we grew very fast during those 2004 to 2000, 10, 9, 11, 12 years, etc. Huh. The thing is, the NDA government, 1999 to 2004, handed over a very fast growing economy to the following government. Okay, our balances were good, our government balances were good, inflation was low, and in 2004, 2003, 2004, we started exceeding 8% growth. Now,
Hmm.
the next government inherited that. But you also saw started to see certain things. Loosening of fiscal discipline. You started to see a sclerotic government where decisions were not being taken. The momentum of the past activities and actions by the government pushed you all the way till 2010-11, high growth, moderate inflation. And then the fat and the filth accumulated in that 4 to 9, 4 to 11, all that started to play up. The economy started to splutter. Your trade exports, which was in a sense growing smoothly, started to splutter from that particular day onwards.
Hmm.
And to a great extent, you had a massive crisis in 2013. And that is why in 2013, we were part of the fragile five.
Correct.
Growth rates had come down, inflation had kicked up, massive trade deficit, the rupee was plunging. It was basically a crisis blown economy. And if you remember, in 2014, the election year, when the government starts giving sops, that particular government had no sops to give. Such was the crisis in that particular government. So when I overstate the case, when I put a stronger case, it's not a case, it's a crucial turning point. I think depending on what happens in this election, we will go forward in certain trajectories. I think if you look at the BJP poll plank,
Hmm.
if you look at what they've promised, it is firmly allied to what they are doing today. Okay, so when they're talking about high tech interventions into high tech and all that sort of a thing, it's completely linked to what we are seeing in the PLI schemes. The urge and the effort given by the government to bring in high technologies, you know, we are basically targeting semiconductors. Okay, we have to get this. Why have we narrowed in? Why have we taken a more interventionist path? Because I think for the last few years, this government has seen that although they imposed fiscal discipline upon themselves, although they uh, made ease of doing business much more, domestically institutions did not cooperate, and I'm talking about the Reserve Bank of India, and
Hmm.
very foolishly, international companies were so enamored of China that they also did not see what was there for the taking. It is only after China started to behave erratically and people understood the importance of diversification of global value chains, supply chains, and intellectual property rights. It is only then that certain companies have started to look towards us. Okay. And it's now clear they're now looking at us with great interest. And one hears that Tata's thrust on a semiconductor plant in Assam, I'm given to understand, the output is already contracted out to be sold. Okay, much of the output is already contracted out to be sold. Look, uh, this is amazing. A offer to set up a semiconductor plant in India had come during the UPA years.
Hmm.
But that was a government in which no decision was to be taken, and therefore people went away. And this is reflective of what had happened in the 1970s. You know, Phillips had made this offer to Dinesh Singh, the then foreign minister. And you had Maharaj Krishna Rasgotra, India's ambassador to the Netherlands, out there. Dinesh Singh, of course, refused, socialist mindset and all that sort of thing. It was much later, Rasgotra Saab told Mrs. Gandhi this happened. And Mrs. Gandhi was furious with Dinesh Singh and with Rasgotra. You should have told me, because Mrs. Gandhi knew the importance of high technology. She may not have understood economics that much, but she knew that this was an industry of the future. Dinesh Singh, of course, did not. We are now basically catching up. We are basically telling companies this is the place to be, and people are coming in. So if you look at our thrust into high technology, if you look at our thrust into startups, you look at the manner in which we are reforming setting our financial markets right,
Mm.
a
Mm.
host of things are happening. You see, for growth to take off, you need investment. For investment, you need people to give you money and people to ask for money,
Ask
investors
him.
and supply funds. Now, previously, what was happening, companies had their balance sheet all in the red, they were indebted, and the banks had non-performing assets. Now, if you look, that has been cleaned up in the last 4 5 years.
Yep.
And even Chidambaram, no supporter of this particular government, says that this is
He's
one big
knowledge.
achievement of the government. And this has to be acknowledged. This has to be
Yeah.
acknowledged. Raghuram Rajan acknowledges this. So you have all the critics of the government actually acknowledging this. Of course, the support ends out here. Raghuram Rajan is vastly critical of the fact that India is going in for PLI, etc., etc.
Manufacturing.
Manufacturing and all that. Let's leave that apart. But if you look at the thrust that India is giving towards electronics, one of the things that electronics does is to create a lot of jobs, because a great
Correct.
part of electronics is extremely labor intensive, especially assembly and all that sort of a thing. But once you start tying up the various strands together, semiconductors, electronics, etc., etc., somewhere down the line, bridges will be built, links will be built, and what seems to be disparate ultimately comes in together and becomes integrated. So this
Mm.
is something that the government, when the government talks about a high technology vision, it's already walking the talk. It's already walking the talk. So what it's promising when it comes to high technology, when it comes to investment, is based on what it has already done. And therefore, I think extremely important, the outcome of the elections that will happen is extremely important.
Is that
On the
how you?
other hand,
Please.
see, on the other hand, if you look at the Congress manifesto, okay, it doesn't talk
So,
about these things at all. Okay, it doesn't talk about these things at all.
mm.
It does not say that we should not go in for high technology, etc. But if you look at the kind of people who are likely to have some influence on what this government does, their statements that this chasing this high technology is a chimera, which we should not, is something that makes me afraid. You see, there are a lot of people with woke sentiments supporting this particular strand, the present dispensation that leads the Congress party. Otherwise, today, the India stack, of which Aadhaar is a part, has played a stellar role during COVID and whatnot. The bulk of it was started by the UPA.
Mhm.
Why did it stall? It was because some woke advisors, economists, put it in the ear of the government. Basically, you're collecting information, and that's too dangerous.
Privacy.
It was privacy laws, privacy concerns. Ridiculous. It had to be Modi who basically gave it the last mile push, as he gave the last mile push in GST also. So
Mhm.
these are the kinds of people, in a sense, who will be whispering into the ear of the powers that be. The finance minister, God forbid, could be one who is of that particular persuasion. And then what you end up getting is something which will be UPA redux. We've already seen UPA 1, we will see UPA 2. So let us not kid ourselves into thinking that the reforms that you see in the Indian economy are irreversible. They
Mhm.
are not. They are not. We have seen several economies go to seed. In fact, what you are seeing in the United States and the United Kingdom is the coming back of poverty and the impoverishing of the middle class, which
Yep.
we never thought we would see. Leadership matters, policies matter, okay, governance matters. And to think no matter which government comes, you'll keep on growing that way is something that, we should not take seriously. Because a strand of it is demonstrated when Raghuram Rajan said, first he said that there's no growth. And then when the IMF, World Bank say there has been growth, he can't deny it. He says, look, this is natural. Poor countries go faster than rich countries, which is correct, by the way. In economics, we have this thing called convergence, where,
Convergence.
yeah, ceteris paribus, all things given constant, a country with a lower per capita income is expected to grow higher than a country with a higher per capita income. But remember, this doesn't always be is always true. I can point out to vast swaths of Africa, which where it does not
Pakistan.
happen. Pakistan, and it's not necessarily countries with civil war. It's
No.
countries with poor governance.
Mhm.
Zimbabwe for one. So all this talk that this is inexorable, this has to happen, is nonsensical, and I think we should be extremely wary of that particular kind of talk.
Is that why we are bringing in iPhone in a big way? $14 billion worth of iPhones were exported. It does put an hand into high tech, and of course the Tesla game. So this is something which is very interesting to me. Why is Tesla? I mean, I can understand why is Tesla so interested. Why are we so interested in Tesla?
Look, the fact is that if you want to get into the EV thing, you try to ensure that the best in the world invests out here.
Hmm. Hmm.
A,
So it becomes credible. Hmm.
not just credible, he has the technology,
Correct.
and if he basically starts selling in your market, then there are certain effects which percolate throughout the rest of the economy. It
Hmm.
doesn't
Hmm.
just stay hidden to Tesla. It also starts to percolate to other EV manufacturers in India and so on and so forth. Let's face it, I mean, jobs are created, investment comes in, and as a result of which Tesla gains, India also gains. The same reason why you allowed all these auto manufacturers of the world to invest in India. They took care of a large market, and then later on, once we gained proficiency, many of them also used this as a springboard to export their products to other countries. We are hoping the same will happen with Tesla also. Okay, Tesla, of course, just initially just wanted to export to India and not to add value, but that I think is not going to happen. If he comes in, he has to basically produce locally. He knows that.
Correct. Hmm.
So once that happens, I think we are looking at a game changer. Number one.
Hmm.
iPhones, again, this is part of our boost into foray into electronics. The part that is coming in is possibly the assembly part. Okay, not very high tech. But sooner or later, this changes. Remember
The MRO and all that.
How Maruti
Hmm.
Suzuki came in. Previously, I mean, Madhu Dandavate would basically sarcastically remark, except for the name and the air in the tire, nothing is
Yes.
Indian about Maruti. That's changed. Things
Yeah.
changed, you see. And remember, the Taiwanese are also looking at the semiconductor
Mhm.
space in India. Okay,
Yeah.
so things will change. And it's not just assembly, they're also basically bringing in those parts of the operation when it comes to casings and all that sort of a thing. So things will change. Things will change. Look, our ability to absorb technology, grasp technology, I think is unparalleled. Everybody, any foreign investor who has invested in India will tell you that. Be it the Germans, be it the Brits, be it the Yanks, the Japanese, they know we are capable of doing it. And by the way, I mean, this is maybe an old story. I was in China in 2005, and it was clear that our capability to absorb technology and do stuff was, at least at that time, better than China. What China does better is scale. You know, they basically expand the scale of operations to such levels that they derive in enormous energies, say economies, from their massive scale of production. And of course, the rapidity with basically which change their product mix, among other things. So now the Europeans and the global majors are now understanding that if they have to insulate their supply chains from shocks, if they have to insulate themselves from IPR theft, unfair competition from IPR
Yeah.
theft, then India is the place to do business.
Best bet.
It
Mhm.
is, it is not happening as fast as one would like it to be, but it is happening.
True. So I just want to ask you a short comment about this whole overcapacity thing of China. When Janet Yellen recently had gone there, and
Hmm.
the one thing that she told the Chinese, and I was quite happily amazed for the first time Chinese actually got it from the Americans inside China, that you're overproducing. Now,
Uh,
fair enough, overproducing is good. I take your point. Where I get the question from is the economies of scale. Uh, Overproduction, fair enough. You have the capacity to dump, but how long will you be able to sustain the subsidies in a declining market, sir? In a declining economy?
Look, the thing is, that is a separate question. But the fact is, they can do it for quite some time. And you may say, or kitna der karoge? The fact is, other companies in other economies start getting hurt. So whether you can do it for a long period of time or a short period of time is not a question that we should ask. We should
Hmm.
simply say that A, it should not be done. But overcapacity per se should not have been a problem. Why? If China were exporting from the rest of the world, exporting to the rest of the world, and in the same breath importing from the rest of the world,
Hmm.
okay, you would be creating purchasing power in other economies to buy your goods. But when you have a mercantilist kind of an attitude, okay, where you underconsume, you are not consuming yourself. Your, I mean, consumption levels as a proportion of GDP in China are not as high as they should be. We are basically exporting only to the rest of the world, okay, and not importing from the rest of the world. You are following what is called a beggar thy neighbor policy.
Correct.
So
Hmm.
if you are a
Hmm.
small economy, it's okay. But when you are the second largest economy in the world, then
Won't work.
these policies have a date where they stop operating altogether. Okay. If you have that kind of export thrusts, who will buy? Because they don't have the necessary purchasing power to fulfill your excess capacity. Why? Because you don't import. Although there is need for import. For example, I've given this example, pharmaceuticals. There are several drugs which is India is a position to export to China. And there's been a movie in China about a Chinese father's struggle to buy a drug for his child who's suffering from cancer, and it's available in India. And by the way, the travails of that father was made into a movie and it was a massive hit. This is the problem where China is concerned. That
Hmm.
this is basically taking mercantilism to a different level altogether.
Different level. Hmm. Understood,
And they
sir.
don't understand that this is self defeating.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's even if other countries do not take reciprocal action, they will be so impoverished they won't be able to buy from you. And this is something that Chinese either choose not to understand, or their structural rigidities are so great that they can't get out of it.
That's a very interesting thing. I mean, I've not seen this argument. What you've actually told us is a very, very. I
Actually,
read a
no,
lot about
actually,
this.
no, Adi, some people have talked about it. I think
Okay,
Professor
I
Arvind
might not have.
Virmani has Professor
Okay,
Arvind Virmani has alluded to this. I forget exactly where. Other people have also talked about this. Okay, people have talked about this. Unfortunately, in this entire din, because there are lots of people trying to influence the debate on China,
Mhm.
in the entire din, what happens to get crowded out is how unfairly China pushes, subsidizes its industries against all, if not free trade norms, certainly WTO norms. This is
Correct.
something that people like Professor Virmani have been talking about. But then,
Mm.
unless you make outrageous statements, you don't get necessary traction. I've noticed this about economists. There's a certain economist in Ithaca who makes absurd statements from time to time. He gets traction. But a person who basically chooses to make
Makes
his
sense.
statements on the basis of data uh, appears gets seems to get very little traction.
Well, so if I may, that's how the cookie crumbles.
That's how the
That's the
cookie
worst
crumbles.
part. Yeah. So coming back to India, we've got a couple of opportunities going for us. One is, of course, the PLI schemes and stuff like that, which are working very well. There's a lot which has happened. A lot needs to be done. Uh, but one gap I see within the economy, that it's not a gap of economic structure, but it's a gap of a networking structure, if I may. We I'll give you a small example of drones, right? Uh, we have a very small drone engine business right now within India. Very few people have started up doing this, but a lot many more people are making drones, right? The propellers, for that matter, there are almost 150 firms making just the propellers of various different kinds. Are we going to over concentrate on easy industry by not having a certain regulatory or not having a certain coordination within our economic, the new features of the economy within the PLI, or is there some way to regulate this thing, sir?
Look, at the end of the day, we tried regulation before 1991. It doesn't really work. At the end
Okay.
of the day, see, the drones are the new kids on the block, and as a result of which a lot of people have rushed in. There'll be a shakeout in this particular industry. The weaker ones who do not have ideas, actually don't know what they're doing, they'll drop off. Okay, they'll drop off. The number of firms that will remain will be relatively lower, will be low, but they'll be pretty lean firms. Okay. Now the thing is, what concerns me is I believe this sector is not expanding as fast as it should. Look, people have concepts. In India, the problem is from concept to manufacturing,
Yep.
it becomes a problem because you talked about propellers, etc. But when you start talking about the other parts a drone needs, you have to import them from outside. All the integrated circuits, chips, and all that sort of a thing are not to be found domestically, they are imported from outside. But I have no problems with that, provided that particular supply chain is properly diversified.
Hmm.
Okay. But I think one of the main goals that we have to see is we have to basically ensure that drone technology takes a much more becomes a much more integral part of our lives, both business lives as well as part of our defense outreach, as our defense structure, much more than it currently is. I think
Correct.
that is where we have to work. How do I use drones in mainstream drones into agriculture? How do I mainstream drones into courier services? How do I mainstream drone into a lot of other things? I'm basically looking at that. I think the potential use of drones, in a sense, is still largely undertapped in our country. And I think what we have to do is to ensure more drones come in. Number one, of course, oversight is required. I mean, you think like a terrorist, and you can do a lot with drones also. So we need certain kinds of regulation whereby each drone, in a sense, is electronically registered, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
and all that sort of a thing, so that the moment it takes to the air, there is some central agency which knows that the registered drone has taken into the air, and I know that it is spoken for. Whatever,
Correct.
how that is
Correct.
managed is a regulatory thing. Let the security people and the IT people and the drone people sit together and solve that matter out. But
Mm.
the intrusion of drone technology into India, in my mind, is still at a very nascent stage. It hasn't come to the stage where I would say it is saturated. You see, a lot of players are coming in, but I do not see the breakthrough in technology and know how which mainstreams it into our lives. And there's no reason why. I mean, at the end of the day, if you look at the price of certain drones, given what they can do, they're fairly nominal actually. They're
Mm.
fairly nominal.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to see first the mainstreaming of drones into our economy, the rural economy, as well as the service economy, and indeed the manufacturing economy. Defense, certainly so. Okay. But first, let that happen. Let that happen. That has not happened yet. It may be happening, but in my opinion, it's not happening fast enough. So
I
the
think.
thought that you're talking about, Adi, is important, but I don't think it's a pressing problem right now.
No, I just took drones as an example, but I must say, sir, Prime Minister Modi will be very happy to listen to this answer if he ever watches this video, because
No, no,
you've kind of
look,
said
listen,
what he's been dreaming of.
no, Adi, there are n number of YouTubes, especially how the Israelis use their drones,
Mm.
to test for soil, water, and all that sort of a thing. Given the fact that one third of our districts are water stressed, okay, intelligent farming requires, sustainable farming requires that you take the help of technology, okay, and drones, if you look at it, I mean, are such a small investment.
Mm.
The intelligent drone is such a small investment. So, I mean, I could, one should do some calculations. How much subsidy in terms of free electricity is given to a particular farmer, say in a state like Punjab?
Mm.
Okay, I'll guarantee you, in 1 year, it is much, much more than the price of a particular drone. Much, much more. Has to be.
That's like, and I think one of these initiatives that has come out now, Drone Didi or something like that. I think that's a very interesting this thing, and it's actually hinting to towards what you're also mentioning. We saw a couple of trials of them, and I hope it does get fitted in properly. So coming to I want to go to the tertiary sectors of the economy. I mean, we've got the top end sector which is doing pretty well, and the challenge would be to the tertiary sector because the global economy kind of is taking a dump. If I'm sorry to use the word, but that's the realistic picture that anybody can give. There are reports about American banks being in crisis. There are reports about Chinese banks being in crisis. We know China's real estate is down. What are we heading for, sir? Can I get an answer for that? And then I want to kind of see tertiary sector. How does it impact, sir?
See, there are
The
two issues
secondary
out
sector
here.
of the economy. Hmm.
No, that's a tertiary. Secondary is manufacturing. There are
Yes, sir.
the service. If you're talking about the tertiary sector, that's a services sector, or if
Services.
you're
Yes, sir.
talking about services. Now, look, there
Yeah.
are two things to do about it. One is basically to be demand led, in the sense that global companies make a demand and you basically latch on to that demand and you are dragged up as global demand rises. Alternatively, you basically start designing service products in such a manner that you create a demand for yourself. Okay, so you capture shelf space. And I think um, our IT industry, IT enabled services industry, like one observer, Suraj, he's a great fan of yours. He's on Twitter. He says we are a one trick pony. We have not been able to increase, develop, design new services, which in a sense, we've taken a good large part of the pie of the business process offshoring. We are not so much into knowledge process offshoring yet. But if we were to design these particular products and make these mainstream, make them mainstream. I mean, we are not into gaming. Why aren't we into gaming? What is preventing us from basically entering this particular field? Okay,
I know.
so there is a lack of imagination when it
Mm.
comes to our services exports, no doubt about it. People will argue that given the tremendous arbitrage opportunities that exist between what we can do and what the West were doing, let us fill in that particular gap first. And I think we filled in that gap. And that is the kind of demand that depends on global growth trajectories. If global growth grows, that grows. If it doesn't, you don't.
Mm. Mm.
Now we are not making headways into other services, gaming, entertainment, we are still minimum. That is basically where we have to actually enter. And there is a diffidence in us, I think, which basically stops us. This diffidence does not exist in the Chinese. It does not exist in the Chinese. We still have that particular diffidence. And I think sooner or later, our IT majors, they will have to take the leap. If other independent bodies take the leap and go ahead, nothing like it. Okay. But I would like somebody with massive financial heft who have already made beachheads in Europe and America, the largest markets, to actually start, incubating some gamers to come in to this particular field. They can do it.
Yeah.
Whether they're doing it or not is another matter altogether. So this is one serious problem. The other serious problem is the availability of skills, the quality of skills. One is my student who basically will leave the university 4 years from now will probably find that when he comes to the real world to apply for a job, that he does not have the skills the world requires. So what we are producing basically are people who are not skilled to enter a particular workforce. People talk about the unemployment part. You talk to an employer and they'll say, yeah, these characters are unemployable because they don't have necessary skills.
Yeah, there's nobody. Bande nahi hai.
Number two is basically jo bande hai, the quality of those characters, that's low. I mean, 18 years ago, Infosys said, we are able to hire only 0.8% of all the people we interview. That means out of 1,000 persons they interview, they were able to hire only 8. Not willing, able. They wanted more. So there is a massive problem of skilling. There is a massive problem of quality. And unless you have these two, people with imagination, people with skills, and people with the ability to execute what they are imagining into real life services or products, you won't be able to do this. Now, the Chinese have, over the years, invested in a lot of this. And as a result of which, they have had some successes. In that sense, India has not yet tried. We have not yet tried. I mean, I would be happy to be corrected. Which is the Indian game that has,
No.
or the final product, which has basically set the
Broken the
Hudson
internet.
or the Yangtze on fire? I don't think there is any.
Correct.
And that's a problem. That's a problem.
You're absolutely right, sir. You're absolutely right. I think we need to get more contemporary in our approach as well. We can't be stuck with the traditional things. Ki bhai, abhi, let's focus on this, that, and the top end technology and all that stuff. You need to go all directions. Absolutely correct, sir. Because a lot of people will say, "Yaar, game bana ke kya milega?" Bhai, the game has so much tech and so much backend and so much this and that, and plus it's a huge amount of money and a large market. So, so
See, our IT majors, in a sense, they have to invest very little money, in these particular startups. The beauty of IT and gaming is, if it catches on, this is all software. All you have to do is to duplicate it and sell. Okay, it has to catch on. The thing is the following: they're playing a very safe game, and in my opinion, a very foolish game, by denying themselves the possibility of unthinkable revenues by not entering into this particular sector at all. Um, as to why they're doing it, I have no idea.
a bit of hesitancy, sir.
Uh, okay, but the thing is the following. Uh, I can understand a middle class person with a government job being hesitant, but businessmen who already are worth billions, have a massive cash reserves, spending a few crores, to prop up a few startups, is something, I thought would be chicken feed, but it's not happening.
True. So, and about the global economy, so how do you think, this global kind of pull down which is happening, and which we can see because of the wars and this and that, and a whole lot of issues there. And I don't want to get into those issues, but I want to know, how is it going to impact us? Will we see our banks kind of becoming a bit weak? Will we see our industry kind of slowing down? Because a lot of people are predicting a little bit of a jhatka by the year end. Firstly, do you agree with that, and how do you think things will go forward?
Look, the largest jhatka, in my opinion, occurred when Russia attacked Ukraine. Okay,
So,
it's the bog down. I was afraid that the Israeli response to Iran would be something big. That doesn't seem to have happened. So I do not see any major geopolitical event occurring that can be a spoiler like the Russia-Ukraine war was. Okay. It seems now, both for the UK and the United States, that the worst part of their inflationary attacks may be over. Unemployment rates in the United States are high, are fairly low. There seems to be a recovery of sorts. And I think, given the fact that the United States is our largest market, I do not see any adverse winds out there uh, to basically set us back. But my thing is the following: that country does not just cater to our exports, it also caters to Chinese exports. Our problem, apart from a stagnation of the global economy, is the fact that our export shares have not increased. That's a problem. Okay, if you look at our trajectory of exports, there's a small blip during the 2008 global financial crisis. And then from 2012, 13 onwards, 11, 12, 13 onwards, it's been wavered. There has been a recovery of sorts. If our trajectory of growth had been maintained, we would have reached our current level of exports of goods and industries 7 years ago. 7 years ago. We've, look, if there have been tailwinds in the headwinds in the global economy, it's been for everybody. Why is it that we have seen our export performance, in a sense, flutter? Why has Bangladesh and Vietnam, why have they done so well? Okay, this is a question that we have to ask ourselves. There are problems with the global economy. I think the worst is behind us. I have no doubt that the worst is behind us. I wish that I had wished, one of the things after Trump was gone, that the Americans would be more reasonable towards Iran and allow them in. That has not happened. Be that as it may, the fact remains that since COVID, And especially since that inflationary spike of 2021, 22,
Mm, mm.
I think we've seen recovery of sorts. The recovery has not been as robust as they should be, but my problem is that it's one thing to say, okay, let the global markets grow and we'll grow along. It's also occupying, expanding your share, not necessarily in the same goods, but also in different goods. And we've
Different
not been
goods.
able to do that. We've not been able to do
Mm,
that. If you
mm.
look at apparel, uh, Bangladesh has left us far behind.
Yeah, there
In
is growth. There's no question, but there is a lot to be done.
Yes, a lot to be done.
For the size
In
of our country, I
electronics,
think we should have been.
yeah,
Yeah,
in electronics, it's basically
yeah,
the
yeah.
Vietnamese who basically left us behind and ran away very very far. Why weren't we doing that? You see,
Mm,
and that is why at the beginning of the show I talked about the thing. If you think all this is inexorable, no.
mm,
We
mm, mm,
started to
mm.
lose our initiative from 2009-10 onwards. Okay, when there were offers to set up semiconductor plants in India, we didn't take them up seriously, and a host of other things happened, which basically set us back. I think we have to basically now see how do I regain lost ground. We are 7 years behind when it comes to exports. We should have been where we are 7 years ago. We are not. That's the problem.
That's very interesting. So, lastly, I want to ask you about you know you've kind of given a very positive sort of an outlook for the overall global economy, but let's kind of go sector by sector or region by region and try and see the impact towards India. So, first, I want to ask you about America and Europe. Do you see the American economy kind of sputtering back into shape? Do you see the debt is going up? Of course, every 100 days, $1 trillion goes up. Is that sustainable? Will they be able to do something about it? How do you
As
think
long
Europe is going
as
to fare?
as long as you accept American dollars, the rest of the world accepts American dollars for imports into the United States, that's not a problem. So they're basically printing money. But as I said, uh, employment rates seem to be up.
Yep.
Inflation seems to be moderating in the United States.
So
Okay,
is that
it was
is
not.
that is that artificially kind of controlled, or is that a natural progression, sir?
See, the question is the worst of the inflation took place last year,
Correct.
8.3%, etc.
Yeah.
UK had
Yeah.
double-digit inflation, 11 point. So from that, it seems to be moderating. Although the shock of the previous year's inflation is still very fresh on the minds of American consumers. You know,
Hmm.
that is the
So they're
kind
a
of
little
inflation they had not seen for
restrictive.
4 decades. Okay,
Restrictive.
so
Okay. Hmm.
yeah, so the American consumer, in a sense, is in shock. That shock has not receded,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
inflation is moderating. Unemployment rates are low. The economy seems to be recovering. Seems to be recovering, and I see no reason as to what can set it behind, barring another unforeseen geopolitical event. I don't see that how that will be stopped. Europe spluttering along. The United Kingdom was a major problem. They saw double-digit inflation last year. That seems to have moderated also. So I don't see the global economy growing very very fast. But I think the dangers, in a sense, are behind us. The
Sir.
problem is China. Okay, Chinese growth, again, as I said, spluttering. Some people think that it will come back into action. It again has started to export. But that kind of export is basically mercantilism, which ensures that China therefore grows at the expense of others. Okay. Now, if that is the kind of growth that Chinese growth that enthuses a lot of people, then I would say the outlook for the global economy, as seen by India, would be grim. That means that would be a China that would be trying to crowd you out. On the other hand, if you see a more sustainable policy where the Chinese also allow imports as well as and while they're exporting, I think that is far more sustainable. As to whether that happens or not, will to a great extent will depend on how other countries deal with China. Will they let their economies be a receptacle for Chinese products?
Hmm.
without China also allowing access to their particular market, their access to Chinese markets. That is something that we have to see.
Do you kind of foresee that happening, sir?
Look, I do not foresee that happening, but I do foresee a diversification of global supply chains.
Correct.
Okay, it's happening. Okay, now people will still say, okay, okay, China still dominates. Of course, it dominates.
It
You don't
does.
diversify in a single day. Okay, but once you start this particular process, it becomes inexorable, because when you see, you try another source, and then you see that particular source has certain advantages which was unthinkable in China. It is quite possible that we will become the recipients of new technology and new goods rather than the Chinese, because the Europeans and the Americans know that your intellectual property is safe in India and that's not safe in China. So that is why,
I
you have a lot of these leading articles in Global Times, etc., saying that India is not ready enough to receive that kind of foreign investment.
I mean, you see leading articles in the
Yeah.
Economist saying, "Oh, China is kind of, there is sputters of economy, and the Chinese leaders are looking at it very pragmatically. Oh, the CEOs of American firms have gone there. This, that." I heard the interviews of CEOs when they came back. They said, "Nah, no."
Look,
That was the feedback. I mean, paraphrasing, but that's what they said. No.
look. See, if you treat what the Economist is writing as reflective of what Britain thinks, Britain is no longer an economic superpower. It's only a financial power. Okay,
It's
it's
hardly that
sad
also, sir.
that it had such a strong manufacturing base,
Yeah.
which was dissipated so fast and so completely that for the economists and Britain, it doesn't really matter who produces what where. But countries like France, countries like Germany, countries like the United States, which still have a sizable manufacturing presence and in high technology areas, okay, for them, a lot of these things matter. Now, the
Hmm.
Germans are too closely tied to the Chinese economy to make a complete break, but they are not too tightly tied to the Chinese economy to diversify. Nobody is. Whereas, if you look at the United Kingdom, there are some pharmaceutical companies, there are some defense companies. Apart from that, just name me a British company. Their automobile industry is
Right.
owned by the rest of the world. You know, no electronics industry to speak of. This is not the Britain of yore. And
Hmm.
the Economist, in a sense, seems, in a sense, to reflect the thoughts of the city, the financial city. Okay. And of course, British characteristics put in always the balancing game, how to cut down a guy who's rising. And when you can't cut him down, when he reaches that particular critical minimum size, then you start praying to him. So currently, economists' God happens to be the People's Republic of China. So they may criticize China, etc. But at the end of the day, for some reason, it is China that always trumps above India. I don't look. I don't take this economist seriously any longer. I mean, I took it seriously once upon a time, 40, 30 years ago. I don't take it very
Hmm.
seriously. You know,
I
on any
I
issue,
read it beyond which,
yeah,
yeah.
I read it, hoping to be pleasantly surprised, but that doesn't happen.
I read it. Honestly, I like reading. So if any article comes
No,
my
no,
way, I
so
just
do
open
I.
it and read it. I start making a bias halfway through the article and then I say, "यार ये बकवास कर रहा है, इसको नहीं पढ़ना मेरे को." And I'll close it off. But I'll
No, no,
go through the first
I tell you,
premise. क्या
I
है?
go through the entire article because
Hmm.
the red herrings, the uh, uh, falsities are mixed in such a manner, you
Oh
know,
yeah.
as if it's a very disinterested person,
Mm-hmm.
giving his opinion. Huh.
Legitimate opinion. Mm.
Yeah. So I know where that's coming from. See,
Yeah,
one of the things that hugely infuriates a lot of Western journalists is that Indians no longer give a damn. Okay. And I mean, being a colonial, we were a colonial position, and that has basically left us with the knowledge of English. We are able to give it back to them in their language, you know, in a manner that they never expected they would basically get.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
So when that happens, they are left wondering what the hell is going on. And some of them change, some of them become nastier, more insidious, and their arguments and their writings also become extremely malicious. The malice is hidden, okay, but it's extremely malicious. But that is the world.
That's how the world is. Yeah, absolutely, sir.
Yeah.
So as usual, lovely talking to you, and I think this is going to be a wonderful episode, and especially the Chinese economy. I think you've explained it very, very well. I've been
Thank
looking
you
for
very
an
much.
answer. How come the Chinese exports are going up? But nobody kind of points it onto marketeering, and that's I think I'm a little surprised I didn't think of it myself because थोड़ा धुआं गलत जगह से निकल रहा है. But you've kind of hit
These are known, you see. It's the
yeah.
elephant in the room, which everybody knows, but will not talk about.
No, yeah, you nobody, yeah, exactly. That's thank you very much. Everybody, when you read about the Chinese economy, what you're trying to see is, oh, if they do this, this would happen. If they do this, that would happen, and this and that. Nobody's actually saying they're not doing all that stuff. They're doing this. They're doing restructuring and they're closing up. What is the result of that? And that people are not talking about. So thank you for bringing that out, sir. It's always a pleasure talking to you, and I hope to see you back very soon on another probably post poll sort of a economic outlook to kind of understand what's happening. Till then, sir.
So,
Jai Hind.
okay. Jai Hind.